You're listening to Telecast PH. The customer support infrastructure doesn't happen overnight. In fact, the entire infrastructure of the company is an eternal evolution. We must always be mindful of where barriers between departments build up and recognize the importance of crossing them. Today, we're talking about why customer support should be working together with product and some effective ways that can be accomplished. And we'll get into it right after the intro. Hello all and welcome back to another episode of Telecast PH as we continue on with our series about scaling and managing SaaS support teams. I'm Jeff Thompson, your host, Director of Client Solutions here at Telework PH and the voice of offshore outsourcing. Thank you so much for joining. Support teams are often viewed as just the frontline fixers, left out of broader organizational strategies and kept at arm's length from key decisions. However, support can offer a veritable goldmine of insights, uniquely positioned to understand customer pain points and behaviors. For businesses to truly succeed, it's critical that support and product teams work hand in hand, breaking down silos and fostering collaboration. Now, I had a great conversation with Ana-Alicia Siqueiros of Peak.com, and we explored how support teams can effectively influence product roadmaps, bridge the gap between design, features, and customer experience, and play a pivotal role in shaping a more customer-centric approach. It was a great conversation with a lot of valuable insights from Ana-Alicia, and I'm excited to share it with you. But before we get into that, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's podcast, Telework PH, a premier and award-winning BPO here in the Philippines. Telework PH, we build your team, you get the benefit. To find out more about how we can help transform or help build your support team, or if you're looking for a highly skilled virtual assistant in any area of your business, just hop on over to www.teleworkph.com, or you can just hit me up on LinkedIn. Just search Jeff Thompson, Director of Client Solutions at Telework PH and the voice of offshore outsourcing. Now let's get into that conversation with Ana-Alicia. Ana-Alicia, thank you so much for being here.
Jeff, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to be talking to you today.
The honor is all mine. I want to go ahead and dive right in and tell us a little bit about yourself and your role and your experience.
Sure thing. So, Jeff, as you touched upon, my name is Ana-Alicia, and I am currently the Director of Support at a company called Peak. And Peak's mission is really to connect the world through experiences. I have a team that is fully remote as being part of a remote first company. And with over 300 people at Peak, we collaborate globally. Some people are based in the tri-state area where I am. Some are stretched as far as to Utah, to Santiago, Chile, to right outside Mexico City. So we have an impressive team, but also a very collaborative team. I previously to Peak actually worked in the art world. I've always had a common thread of memberships and taking individuals through donors or fundraising, being able to really stream everyone through a joint experience. And I worked in different museums, different art associations, and as well as an online marketplace. So I'm happy to be able to bring experience now into the travel industry.
Well, we all love to travel. I know
Absolutely.
I do. So, being that Peak is a fully remote teams, I would have to say there's several different teams. And if you're all fully remote, expanding the entire globe, I'm certain that there are like some amazing processes that you've implemented to make sure that all of these different barriers, be it cultural or time zones and everything else, are surpassed.
Absolutely. I have to say it is something that I'm very proud of in my work, being able to not just streamline processes, but make sure that they're being efficient, right? That they're working well together. And I think for many of us that might be listening or have familiarity with the support world, you can understand that support could be considered the ugly stepsister or the stepchild of a company. It's certainly
Right.
perhaps not as sexy as sales. It can't necessarily be as fun as success sometimes, but it's something that we all know is a necessary player in reaching company goals and just the company's livelihood. So the fact that we're talking about our relationship with product is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I think there is not a more important relationship in my mind than that of support and product. And I say that because support really has a front row seat to all the customers' aha and uh-oh moments. And
Right.
products can really be kind of behind the scenes, behind the curtain, turning these ideas into reality. So when these two teams join forces, customers are going to get a product that not only works, but that it's going to wow. So I'm excited to dive in a little bit more about how support can be product superhero.
Well, it is important because, as you said, the support is the customer facing. They're the ones that are hearing everything. They're hearing the pain points, but they're also hearing the great things. So all of that, needs to be filtered back, or not filtered back, but it just needs to be, passed on on the product, so they know
Yes.
how to enhance the customer experience.
Yes, yes. And I think it's something, Jeff, that I've learned that we need to speak the same language. Products can be very technical, right? Support
Hmm.
is talking to partners who are not necessarily calling each button by its name or kind of referring to it again in the same language. So the support team really has to be able to translate things to make it digestible by the product team. And I think that's where it can get interesting because as a bridge builder, support really paves the way for customers' expectations in the actual experience. So I think it's really, if you think about just how the support team can communicate pain points and feature requests, it's twofold. It's really first understanding the kind of the infrastructure that is used. And then secondly, the support team needs to incorporate stories into it.
Hmm.
Um, when I note that the support team has to understand the infrastructure and the product team has to understand the infrastructure, I mean that support really needs to effectively communicate these touch points, these pain points. There needs to be a system that both sides believe in. It was only recently, once Peak actually has a new leadership on the product side, I was able to walk them through how is it that the support team kind of tags different conversations, handles and even routes and triages different channels so that we can then have it be reflected to the PMs and have them understand what is it that is happening and how is it all being captured. This was the first step in, I mean, understanding how a company operates internally, but then making sure that we're aligned and seeing, does it make sense? As a support leader, your infrastructure doesn't happen overnight by any means.
No, it doesn't.
um,
No.
it comes together and certainly if you're new to support at a company, you kind of have to figure out what has worked well and what how can it work better. But I think inviting in support, excuse me, inviting in product is going to be absolutely key to make sure that there is that system of trust and system of understanding so that it can be clear, quantifiable data that product teams are going to be able to analyze and hopefully prioritize.
Absolutely. There is that translation that needs to be, done before you take the customer's feedback, and it needs to be translated into a language that product is going to understand. I've made the mistake in the past, where I just copy and paste, here's what the customer said, and they like, what are they talking about? And
Yes.
it's like, so, you serve as the translator. You take what they're saying, and I remember, we had that. They created the process over time because, like you said, support is always somewhere in the middle ground, like nuclear fission. It's always somewhere in the middle ground. It's never completed. As long as you're with a company that is growth minded, there's always going to be, ways to make things better, or
Yes.
differences of, customer base, especially if you're releasing different types of products. Obviously with Peak, you probably have a different customer base of people that want to go to the beach than people that want to go to the mountains. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, that might be a slight difference. However, having a support that understands those two different types of groups, you know what I'm saying, can also help translate
Absolutely.
more, to product in the background.
That is so true. It's important to have not just the support team trained on who the end user is, but also be able to showcase that to product. And I think beyond having data shared with the product team, it's really about bringing customer stories to life because that's really where you can create that aha moment for the product team and really tug at people's heartstrings. I saw this
Mm-hmm.
firsthand when our VP of products actually invited me to a meeting with all the product managers. Now, I have relationships with many of the product managers already. And I know that leaders on my team, some of my direct reports do as well. But to have their attention collectively for almost an hour, it just hadn't happened before, right? So I
Wow.
brought in a trivia of sorts of everything spanning how many tickets does support handle on average a month to how big is the support team? What is the makeup of the support team? And I believe that was really eye-opening because once that foundation was built, I was then able to launch into playing snippets of recordings of what I call our escalation hall of fame and be able to really bring these customer stories to life and give context to all the data that had been shared in dashboards in previous weeks and be able to really showcase the most memorable phone calls, for instance, where let's say, the difficult personalities are showing their color. And to see the faces of these product managers on Zoom, since we are a remote first company, wow, it just really tugged on the heartstrings and it really made an impact. Again, being able to bring customer issues and requests into kind of real life.
Okay, so that's like the support side, bridging that gap. What can product do as a suggestion to help also bridge that gap with support?
Jeff, that's a great question. It's important for it to be a collaborative relationship. Support can give and give and give and invite product in. Product also needs to be receptive of it, right? And I think
Mhm.
products also should be able to invite the support team in at the leadership level as well as the frontline agents. It's important to have touch points. I've seen it at different companies shaped in different ways, whether it be a large open feedback session to that is live, to perhaps instead having kind of this working document, running document in which things are highlighted or asked. These are the wish lists and the ops top 10 of the things that we want that support really wants. But then you run into issues of recent, like recency biases, right? Where you remember the last call or an
Mm.
agent remembers the last call that they had where someone was kind of the loudest and using the most colorful language on and they said, yes, this needs to be helped instead of being able to look at the data. Something that we do right now at the company that I'm at is we actually have set SLAs internally, and that has been a game changer. Being able to know that when an agent escalates something internally or even asks us a question that is not documented somewhere within the FAQs, the partner facing help desk articles, or even the training materials from the feature that was just released, that product is going to be able to reply because the frontline teams have people waiting. Sure, they could be waiting on a call, but they can also be waiting on the response to the email and wanting to know what is going to be the update and how do I use this or what happens next. So again, internally being able to have SLAs between the support team and the product team is huge. And that has been a really, really nice game changer. So the process right now for my team is they may escalate a question within our internal communication of Slack, and the support team needs to provide complete information. The product team then, by a certain amount of time, responds and gives direction and offers more advice as to either a solution or next steps. I personally really, really like this transparency.
I do too. I do too, and I think that that's really valuable because being in the two different settings, sometimes a product may not understand the sense of urgency with getting back with feedback or a response of some sort.
Absolutely.
Where you
Absolutely.
where you have like you said, the support, the queue is full, the calls are coming in, and they're all waiting on an answer. So
Yes. Yes.
letting product understand that there is a sense of urgency there because I mean, I don't ever want to take away from any department, but from what I'm hearing over at Peak is you've been, a lot of companies, their departments all work in bubbles, little tiny bubbles with some cross communication. However, it seems here at Peak you have been able to burst those bubbles to where everybody is kind of communicating and in a nice way. Because you had mentioned about the feedback sessions, and the first thing that pops into my mind, and I'm certain a lot of our listeners would think the same thing, is a lot of times those feedback sessions turn into complaint sessions. You know what I'm saying? Where everybody's just complaining. Well, Joe didn't get back to me on this one, and well, she kept she asked me 10 times, and I had to shut off my Slack. You know what I'm saying? How do you stop that from happening?
Jeff, that's a great question. And I will say not everything is always rainbows and butterflies, right? It is a reality that things aren't necessarily always going to be picture perfect. It's a process building that takes time, and it's something that starts, I would say, at the leadership level, right? So as the director of a team, as a leader of a team, I need to make sure that there's guardrails set, not
Hmm.
just between other teams, like how support collaborates with others at peak, but also within our team itself. So a support agent shouldn't automatically run to product with any question, but instead, it's a matter of asking peers first, being able to ask their manager first, see who is kind of the product expert or that feature expert, who was most recently trained on it, right? In some cases, new hires may even bring the most perspective because they just were most recently introduced to something and just went over the materials most recently that has been provided by our go-to-market teams. It is something that starts, I think, within support and then being able to flesh out, again, those guardrails of what to do and when to do it. I know that there's always going to be variables. Not everything is going to be planned for. Like you
Hmm.
said, some feedback sessions can turn into kind of these he said, she said situations. But if you lay out kind of the expectation of what is going to happen, we're all adults, right? We're all going to be able to understand that we're all working towards the same purpose. And I think that context needs to be very, very clear and set by leaders. I've seen that be very, very successful in making sure that it's not working against each other, but instead it's working alongside each other. And like I said, there's always going to be variables, whether it be the time of year, the roadmap itself, there's going to be turnover in staff, whether we
Right.
like it or not, there's going to be escalations that are coming from your top client that need to be addressed urgently. And unfortunately, that
Hmm.
feature request is not going to be looked at. But as much as there can be planned, we know that there's always going to be a surprise to be found. But if you look at each other to be collaborators rather than kind of the opposing team, there can be success built. Absolutely.
What about now? You had mentioned we have turnover or there's new products or whatever. What about like multiple instances of the same issue being reported a product? I mean, do you have a way that you consolidate that into just one? I mean, like perhaps like some transparency somewhere where instead of product getting the same issue 10 times a shift, they're only getting it once. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. So again, I think it goes back to our conversation about infrastructure and making sure that it's something that can be leveraged by both sides. So I've seen at different companies use Jira differently, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a matter of not creating, like you said, the same issue multiple times, but instead being able to add to it. It's being able to highlight and augment kind of the impact that something is having. And yes, some of that can be by the addition of the name of the customer or the name of the partner that it's affecting, but also, again, being able to bring in those stories and being able to bring in that narrative of, hey, this is our top tier partner, and they're threatening to leave us if we don't take a look at this, if we don't resolve it. That's one way. But of course, in aggregate, smaller customers can really amount to have a large voice if we're going to be kind of revenue driven. But I do think that it's a dual approach of quantitative and qualitative data that helps product teams especially grasp the customer reality and identify where they should be allocating time and resources to improve the product.
All right, so you just mentioned Jira. What other strategies or tools can help improve the flow of information between product and support?
Oh, what a great question, Jeff. I've seen tools and integrate with each other very well. And sometimes not.
Mhm.
We want to make sure that we're providing visibility across tooling. So I've seen different processes built upon Jira, integrated with Zendesk, or perhaps Intercom, just supports day-to-day tooling. I've seen also the leverage of Zapier being able to automate some of these tasks, whether it be starting on the agent side or even when a Jira ticket changes status, so that partners can be notified of, hey, this has been resolved, or hey, this is being looked at. That is if a company has SLAs set, again, internally, the product team. But it's really an area where AI can be a big game changer. being able to have a high level synopsis because not everyone's going to comb through the volume of tickets, right? So it's not necessarily a whole discussion, but it is kind of the invitation of having product look into what support is doing.
So I wanted to circle back to, when we were talking about, the communication. However, you had mentioned which product, which developer, which person in product has the special skills, or, I shouldn't say special skills, but, is in charge perhaps of this specific area, that where the issue is. And a lot of people want to get to that person. And of course, with using these tools and these strategies, it prohibits or it stops the influx of just personal messages going directly to that person, because that's one thing that, I mean, having those processes, it helps streamline the communication so that one person doesn't just get bogged down with personal messages.
Yes, and it's so important, Jeff, to make sure that we're not occupying someone's time with one
Mm-hmm.
particular case, but instead being able to highlight what is happening in a more public setting. So it's something that I tell my team time and time again. Always ask questions publicly rather than in a direct message, a direct email,
Mm-hmm.
because chances are an agent that is asking a question, there's probably someone else that's either going to get the
Right.
next phone call of a customer saying the same thing, or and someone later on down the road kind of tangentially also building upon that question. So it's good for agent training to have public knowledge, to have that public framing, that transparency. But even if someone is perhaps too bogged down, their counterpart can also step in to help, right? It's twofold, being able to get a quicker answer if there's more eyes on it, but then also being able to document knowledge publicly rather than keep it private. So I'm a big fan of having transparency when it comes to knowledge sharing.
Absolutely. And that's how you make remote teams work, right? Because,
Yes.
one of the biggest challenges, or one of the biggest things that people speak about when they talk about, remote teams, people working from home, or, working overseas, whatever, they're saying, well, they're not right next to me, I can't just turn around and tap on them. Yes, you can. Slack. You can tap on somebody, because even if they're in the kitchen making, instant noodles, they'll have their phone with them. You know what I'm saying? And they can answer quickly than if, they were in the cafeteria at the building, or if they stepped outside to go to the coffee shop. So that right there is, putting those public questions out there. I mean, I use that too. I use that, like, ask everybody. Tag the person
Yes.
that you want to talk to, at so and so. Hey, look at this, blah blah blah. But somebody else can say, "Oh, he's busy, I'm gonna jump in," or, she's off today and I can help you with that. And plus, everybody can see that. So you're reading it, you gain the knowledge, or, you get that very same issue. You can go back to Slack and scroll back and say, what was that they were talking about? Just that, oh, here's the resolution right there. Right. And, and
Exactly.
sometimes that's faster than going to a knowledge base and looking it up.
It's true. It's true. It's tricky being able to kind of share knowledge as it comes to being a remote company, but it is something that is powerful because, like you said, people will be available at times that perhaps they may not have been if they were in an office setting. So it's the beauty of being remote and having that flexibility.
So let's move on to some, like, proactiveness. When a new product or feature is in development, in your opinion, what role should the support team play to ensure a smooth rollout? Like, how early should they be involved, and what input can they provide?
Love this question, Jeff, because it is one that I have thought about so often. And it's challenging. It is very challenging to figure it out because oftentimes product teams want to move quickly and they have their own processes of how to QA the feature, when it's going to align for release according to the marketing plan, so on and so forth. But I believe, and I have seen success with this, that support really should be involved as early as a beta testing phase so that support can provide feedback based on what they know to be typical customer workflows and really point out those potential pitfalls. Early involvement is going to allow support to anticipate customer questions and really even develop these necessary training and documentation that is not going to benefit just support, but all frontline facing teams. I
Hmm.
really believe that support as a whole should be part of the beta testing phase. And I've seen it work well in a product showcase, for instance, where the product itself is demoed to frontline facing teams. But I've also seen it be kind of a challenge or positioned as a challenge where PMs might kind of invite support and say, break the feature, break this,
Right, right.
find the find the aspect of where it can go wrong, or what is going to be the ripple effect of how's it going to affect the next thing, or something that already our customers know and love. And I think that framing can be so powerful because it gives such a ownership to the support team and not just considerate of, okay, well, we're just going to allow you to field these questions and that's it. But instead, it's allowing the support team to have an impact. So I personally love the use of when product does a challenge of break this feature for the support team.
And plus, with the support team that is always having that communication with the customer, and they're hearing things. I mean, there's a lot of cases that perhaps product doesn't know about. There's a lot of small little tiny issues that when the support team looks at the new product, looks at the beta, they'll can already identify something that somebody might complain about. Maybe this part is too slow, or this user interface is, you can't find what you need, or something, along those lines. Right. So having that voice, being able to say, yeah, look, break this, break this product. Well, boom, there, it's broken. Now go fix it. No, I shouldn't say it that way, but
No, but
yeah, I
it's
mean,
true. It's true because it kind of it's a benefit to everyone. It allows the wait, what moments that customers are going to come to the support team with to get those kind of not public, not fully launched yet, right? And so it's important to be able to have a balance of it. And again, I know the reality that everybody has a timeline. Every team is going to be working on needing to reach a goal or needing to do something, needing to provide that deliverable. But
mhm.
if there's a plan in place that incorporates support early on, I really do think that there's going to be a benefit and there's going to be the ability to have a more seamless rollout of a product.
I'm all for, should we call it editing? I'm a writer, and I write a lot of content for Telework PH, but I also, I write, stories and books and things along, and and it's the same situation. The product team builds this beautiful thing, but you need that second set of eyes. And I know that, when I'm like, hey, look at this, I just wrote this, and the first thing, well, look at this is, look, that doesn't make sense, and I don't understand this part, and it's frustrating, but you come together and you think about the customer, and at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's about the
Yes.
customer.
Yes, it is. And it really, really should be. I want to be able to avoid my team. And I've had teams be in this position, a multitude and perhaps everywhere I've ever worked, unfortunately. But there's nothing worse than having the customer come to you and tell you, hey, what is this? I noticed this new. Tell me about it. And the support team is caught off guard and they don't know what are they talking about. We want to be able to make sure that we're not putting them in that position. I think that's important.
So sometimes product teams may have to prioritize new features over solving existing pain points. How can support teams navigate these situations when they know certain issues are critical to customers but aren't immediately on the roadmap?
Jeff, what a good question. Understanding that product teams need to prioritize new features at times over solving existing known pain points can be really, really tricky. And it really needs to be one where a balance is struck. I have seen it recently at a company where there was a lot of excitement internally about a new feature being released. Yet, even when it was made public via email and a social media campaign, there were comments of, hey, I've been waiting for years on this feature request. Why are you focused on that? And that can be really tough. That can be really, really difficult to navigate, especially for a front lines facing team like support. But support really can play a strategic role, I would say, by maintaining that regular line of communication with the product team to keep those issues visible. I think a helpful strategy is to share the reoccurring data on these pain points with product and really emphasizing the customer impact rather than just the frequency, because we know that even though someone might be saying things time and time again, we all have that one customer that calls every day, every week to see
Yes.
what is going on, or I'm still thinking about this. But if we emphasize the customer impact, that really can move the needle. I think I've seen some companies actually do a public facing roadmap. I myself have never worked for a company that takes that approach, but it is one that I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about, because I think that can also has its pros and cons in being able to keep to something when we know that there's always going to be surprises that come up. How does that actually work?
I think, I've worked with companies that have done that. They've had like a town hall. They'll do an email blast and have a town hall. If they're upgrading the product or whatever, and to tell them flat out, look, we know that this part of the product or this part has bugs and issues, and we're not going to fix them. Instead,
Yeah,
it's easier to just build a whole new one. And having that town hall with the customers, having it recorded that they can come into, or even the top tier customers, just to let them know. And of course, support is involved with that, so they would definitely be able to navigate those difficult conversations as they come in. But
absolutely.
you had mentioned data and feedback to the product team, and that's basically what we're talking about. But you said the word regular, and that really struck a chord with me, because there should be some sort of regular feedback to keep that communication open. So what kind of data or feedback should the support teams regularly share with the product teams?
I think in this case, when it comes to metrics and sharing of information, less is not going to be more. More is more. Support really should be sharing data that paints a full picture. It's going to be encompassing patterns from NPS or CSAT that hint at product pain points, but it really can be also trends in common issues, customer sentiment, the top feature requests. I think this is really where AI can be a game changer, and it has for us personally, for our team, because it's not just about dumping the data to product. And of course, you can always give them the thousands of tickets that come in centered around this particular feature or the latest release that just happened. But let's be real, no one's going to take the time to actually comb through it, right? So
Right.
we need to serve up those insights on a silver platter to the team, and AI really can leverage that for us. It's all about having actionable data. And I think it comes in the format of presentation, where presentation will matter. We need to, as a support leader, have dashboards that are going to pop, that are going to get attention. I've been able to frame kind of monthly hot takes on different trends, or be able to have even mini impact stories that are, again, showing the human side of the numbers. But it's all about weaving in, like I said, NPS and CSAT scores and volume trends and customer sentiment into real life customer tales, so that we can turn data just from numbers into a powerful tool that product's going to use to shape what's next.
I like what you said there about the CSAT scores and the feedback from the customers, because that seems to be the biggest trend going on right now, and I'm liking it. I'm liking what I'm seeing, because a lot of companies were using CSATs mainly to penalize support agents, and it was always driving them to have higher CSATs. But when you would look at their CSAT score or look at the CSAT questions, it would have, questions relating to the entire company, not just the support interaction. So being able to gather that information, like what is the overall satisfaction of the customer, how to, and giving them, that voice and that space to say what they want to say, then that is information, albeit sometimes it's negative, and people don't want to hear it, but you got to turn around and you got to tell them, look, this is what they're saying, and I'd rather take care of it in a CSAT than have them go on to LinkedIn or have them go on to Facebook or any other social media and talk about it. Right.
It is important to have an eye just stem with support, but it can start with the sales team. It can start with the referral of how they got to where they are today and who they're speaking with today. And it's important to be able to connect still with the customer or the partner about their experience so that they don't necessarily turn or feel like they have to convey what they're feeling on the App Store or Better Business Bureau, or in the case of where I am today, Peak, G2 or Capterra. At the end of the day, support really can play a big role as it comes to crafting and maintaining that positive experience.
Right, because I mean, honestly, like we said in the beginning, for so long, support has been looked at as, the lowest on the totem pole. But by bridging these gaps, like what we're talking about today, product can actually take that feedback and what do our customers want? What do they want to see beyond feature requests, right? How can we
Exactly.
make them even more happy and surprise them and wow them? Because sometimes customers, they're asking for something without asking for it, if that makes sense.
Yes, it happens time and time again. And that's where support needs to translate. It is the partnership that is going to be able to bring about fewer customer headaches and just more of these, this is amazing moments that everybody in a company wants. At the end of the day, when support and products are going to play nice with each other, everyone's going to come out ahead.
When you have that mutual respect,
Absolutely.
everybody's got to.
Absolutely.
Well, we're just about out of time, but looking ahead, and especially for Peak, how do you think the relationship between support and product teams will evolve as businesses increasingly adopt a customer-centric approach?
This is a question that excites me, Jeff, really because I believe that there's just an increase and a belief in having more integrated cross-functional teams. And that's where I'm most excited about, where support and product are going to co-own goals related to customer satisfaction, feature success. It's really going to allow us to have best practices that are going to keep our teams aligned. And I'm excited to be a part of this, being able to create and formalize feedback loops and having a culture of shared accountability. It's really what excites me in my day to day.
Well, I'm excited to see what happens at Peak as well. I'm looking forward to the future. So we're just about out of time, like I said, and I just want to let all our listeners know that Ana-Alicia has joined us on Veterans Day. She came in on a holiday to record this with me, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Do you have any last advice for any support directors out there that may be wanting to bridge that gap with the product team, but are maybe hitting some roadblocks here and there?
Jeff, I learned this somewhat recently, but no one's going to be able to help you if you don't invite them in. Nothing has to be fully baked in order for there to be an opinion. So I think as a leader of a team, as a director of a support team, it is always important to be vulnerable and find a solution because things will overlap. And that's where it's important to create these relationships with peers at your level, at a higher level, even one below you. No one is going to be too small. It's all about inviting others in.
Excellent advice. Ana-Alicia, thank you very much for being here. This was very valuable to myself, and I'm certain to our listeners.
Jeff, I'm looking forward to a next conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Telecast PH. Thank you so much for listening. I've been Jeff Thompson, and if you're ready to explore what offshore outsourcing can do for you with a remote team or a virtual assistant for your business, check us out at www.teleworkph.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. And until then, may the force be with you.